May we please rise to take the first stanza of
We are healthy, our own dear native land, no private songs deliver, in brotherhood we stand. Nigeria's old and proud to serve a sovereign motherland.
Thank you very much. May we please take our seat now, as it is our tradition in the House of Representatives. Lead us in an opening prayer.
Procedures, members are supposed to introduce themselves by themselves. So you can understand that this is a different program entirely. It's a program that brings all the stakeholders from the executive, from the private sector, and the parliament together. So we have to bend sometime our procedures to accommodate other procedures. Our esteemed invited guest, of particular mention, the chairman of the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, who are partners to this event. In fact, they are even the sponsors par excellence to this very important event. The chairman of the Nigeria Independent System Operators that's here with us, the managing director of MBET, the managing directors of various organizations that are here, representative of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Please forgive me, the representative of His Excellency, the host, the governor of Lagos State, who is here with us. Representative of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, and other security personnel that are here, or agencies. Our esteemed invited guests, members of our secretariat, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to today's very important occasion. Mr. Speaker, I've made all the necessary plans to be here today, but the exigencies, you woke up today and the jet that is supposed to bring him here is undergoing maintenance, but he's still making arrangement to be here maybe later today. I communicated to the MC that I will only deliver my opening remarks when Mr. Speaker is around, but the fact that Mr. Speaker is ably represented by the majority whip, not even the minority, the majority whip, deputy majority whip, Honorable Isiaka, I'll go ahead to deliver my opening remarks, and the program will continue. When Mr. Speaker arrives, I believe he'll have one or two things to say to further reinforce this commitment. I will now read my prepared speech. His Excellency the Speaker, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, PhD, GCON, distinguished colleagues and members of the AD-HOC Committee, members from the National State Houses of Assembly here present, His Excellency the Governor of Lagos State, ably represented, other governors' representatives, stakeholders to this very important event, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you warm greetings from the House of Representatives of the Republic of Nigeria, and in particular from the Ad-Hoc Committee on the Probe of Power Sector Reforms and Expenditure 2007 to date. We are gathered here in Lagos today for a parliamentary roundtable that is not merely another conference, but a necessary and urgent conversation about the future of electricity in Nigeria, about light, productivity, jobs, security, and the very competitiveness of our economy. For nearly 2 decades, Nigerians have been told that reform is coming, that privatization will bring reliability, that tariffs will reflect service, that investment will follow clarity, and that megawatts will translate into real power in homes and factories. Yet, the lived reality for many citizens and businesses remains darkness, high self-generation cost, and a deep loss of confidence in the sector. Our mandate as a committee is clear: to examine with full transparency what has been done from 2007 to 2024, what has worked and has clearly failed, where the money went, and most importantly, what must be done differently going forward. This roundtable is a crucial part of that work. We are here to listen, interrogate, learn, and then legislate. Having invited and received submissions from most of you, the stakeholders, at the commencement of this assignment, we have developed a clear understanding and certain capacity on the working of the sector that was also followed by fiscal assessment of some plans and projects in line with the laid down procedures of the House. I will therefore structure this address along the 7 key areas that were identified in the course of our various engagement and interactions with you as follows. 1. Effectiveness or otherwise of privatization generally. 2. Policy and reforms issues. 3. Generation, transmission, and distribution challenges. 4. Liquidity and tariff-related challenges. 5. Gas for power question and the Petroleum Industry Act. 6. Legal and regulatory framework, audit and gaps. 7. Synergy and collaboration with subnationals and other stakeholders. On the effectiveness or otherwise of the privatization generally, Your Excellency, honorable colleagues, and esteemed stakeholders, we recall that the 2013 privatization of the power sector, especially the unbundling of and sale of the PHCN successor companies, was sold to Nigerians as a historic turning point. The objectives were clear: improve efficiency, attract private capital, reduce government fiscal burden, and deliver reliable power at fair tariffs. More than a decade later, the House of Representatives has a duty to ask candidly: has privatization delivered value to Nigerian citizens? Has it delivered value? Expect disappointing outcome after about 34 billion US dollars, about 5.12 trillion Nigerian naira have been spent in the sector. Generation capacity installed versus actual available and dispatched power remains far below national needs. Distribution losses, technical, commercial, and collection remain unacceptably high in many discourses. Service quality and reliability for many consumers is poor, driving massive self-generation via diesel, petrol, and smaller solar systems. The federal government has continued to bear a heavy fiscal burden through interventions, subsidies, and support to the value chain. We must be honest, privatization, as implemented, has not fully achieved its intended objectives, and hence the reason why we are all here to ask ourselves, interrogate ourselves, and tell ourselves the truth going forward. The assumption under which the reforms were designed, the contractual framework, and whether they were appropriately structured and enforced, the governance of the process, transparency, accountability, and performance monitoring, whether some assets are fundamentally unviable under current regulatory and market arrangements. This committee intends to use evidence from operators, regulators, consumers, and independent experts to determine the following: where privatization must be corrected or deepened, where contractual terms must be revisited or enforced, where restructuring, recapitalization, concessioning, or even may be necessary in the public interest. 2. Policy and reform issues. The Nigerian power sector has suffered from policy inconsistency, overlapping institutions, and the reform fatigue. Successive governments have launched policies and roadmap yet implementation gaps remain wide. We must confront several questions. The questions amongst what so many Nigerians ask are: our current policies coherent from generation through transmission to distribution and end use? Do we have a clear, realistic, and time-bound national electrification vision? Are our policies aligned with industrial policy, digital economy, strategy, and climate commitments? We have seen frequent changes in leadership and direction in key agencies, overlapping roles and mandates among ministries, departments, and agencies. Policy pronouncement not backed by enforceable legal and regulatory instruments. As legislators, we recognize that effective reform requires the following: policy stability across political cycles, clear separation of policy making, regulation, and commercial operations, long-term planning that is insulated as far as possible from short-term political pressures. This committee will be recommending: 1. A review and consolidation of the existing policy document into a single, hierarchically clear national power sector policy framework. 2. Stronger mechanism for stakeholder consultation before major policy shifts. 3. A more structured interface between the legislator, the executive, regulators, and operators on an ongoing basis. 3. On generation, transmission, and distribution challenges. Our electricity supply industry is a value chain. A failure at any link undermines the entire system. Starting with the generation. Nigerians' installed generation capacity is far higher than actually available, and what is available is higher than what is actually dispatched. We face dependence on gas-fired plants with chronic gas supply constraints, aging hydro and thermal infrastructure, limited integration of renewable energy at scale, contractual and payment risks that discourage new investment. We need to move from announcement of capacity to actual, dependable, and dispatchable megawatt. We'll be asking this question: what is the true, verifiable, available capacity today? What are the main constraints, technical, fuel, financial, or regulatory? What reforms are needed to ensure that existing plants are optimally utilized and new capacity is added sustainably? On transmission, transmission has long been the weak link. Issues include insufficient wheeling capacity relative to potential generation. Projects were awarded for the past 16 years, and still those projects that are aimed at enhancing the transmission capacity still remain ongoing. Congestion, grid instability, and frequent system collapses, aging infrastructure and slow execution of critical projects, governance and investment challenges within the TCN framework. We must determine whether the current structure, funding model, and governance of the transmission system are fit for purpose, especially as we move toward a more decentralized electricity market and subnational participation. On the distribution remains a direct interface with consumers and is where the greatest distrust lies. High aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses, poor metering levels, and reliance on estimated billing for many customers, weak infrastructure leading to load shedding and technical outages, perceived and sometimes proven inefficiencies, governance issues, and underinvestment. This underinvestment is linked to maybe the first mistake of sourcing for the investors into the distribution sector. Most of the distribution companies could not invest or even expand from what they have inherited. We must examine whether current discourse structure have the financial and technical capacity to deliver, the status and impact of performance improvement plans, the possibility of sub-franchising, performance-based contracting, and the innovative models to improve efficiency and accountability. On liquidity and tariff-related challenges, A power sector cannot function without a viable financial model. Today, the Nigerian power market is characterized by tariffs that have often been below the cost reflective level, creating revenue shortfalls. Do we continue on this trajectory? Certainly no. Government must find a way out. This committee is set to ensure that the government generally is indemnified from the continuous endless subsidies and burdening the fiscal policy through those interventions and subsidies. Government intervention funds and subsidies to plug gap, often without clear performance conditionalities, monitoring debt among market participants and toward gas suppliers, public outrage over tariff adjustment when service does not improve. The House keenly aware that electricity must be affordable for households and businesses. At the same time, the sector must be financially sustainable to attract investment and maintain infrastructure. It must therefore rigorously examine tariff methodologies, assumptions, and transparency in their application. Ensure that any tariff increase are tied to measurable service improvement and network investment. Strengthen accountability for government interventions and ensure that they are conditional on performance. Explore targeted subsidies and social protection for vulnerable consumers rather than broad, poorly targeted subsidies that distort the market. The objective is simple: a fair tariff regime that balances consumer protection and sector viability. Gas for Power and the Petroleum Industry Act, PIA. Honorable, Your Excellency, the Honorable Chief Whip, or the Honorable Speaker, ably represented. His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State, ably represented. My dear colleagues, you can bear witness that gas is an important instrument or material or raw material in the power sector. So our gas for power challenge is not purely technical, it is legal, commercial, and policy driven. On the one hand, Nigeria is blessed with abundant gas reserves. On the other hand, power plants routinely face inadequate gas supply or interruptions. Why? Gas pricing and payment disputes, infrastructure constraint, pipeline processing and evacuation, competing demand from export markets. The Petroleum Industry Act was intended to create a modern, legal and commercial framework for the oil and gas sector, including gas for domestic use. The committee will interrogate to know to what extent has the PIA been implemented in a way that prioritizes and secures domestic gas for power. 2. Are the domestic gas obligations and pricing frameworks under PIA sufficient, practical, and enforceable? 3. That there are misalignment between the PIA, power sector laws, and regulatory practice that deter reliable gas supply for power plants. We must work towards a more coherent domestic gas policy that explicitly and firmly secure gas supply for power generation on commercially sustainable terms. 2. Alignment of upstream and midstream gas incentives with the needs of the power sector. 3. Stronger coordination between the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the NEC, Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and other relevant agencies. On legal and regulatory framework audit. A key mandate of this ad hoc committee is to conduct a legal and regulatory framework audit to expose gaps and propose further legislative action. The sector is governed by a web of instruments: the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, subsequent amendment and regulations, the PIA, state electricity laws, market rules, performance agreement, licenses, and a wide range of contractual agreements. All this the committee is working through this document, and I'm sure by the end of this engagement, the committee's capacity will be deepened, and we'll have a lot of take from here going forward to shape our final report. Our question includes, therefore, are existing laws up to date with present realities, especially with the constitutional amendment that now allows subnational government a greater role in electricity? Do we have clarity of roles between federal and state regulators? Are regulatory agencies truly independent, transparent, and accountable? Are there overlapping provisions or gaps that create uncertainty for investors and confusion for consumers? We are committed to the following: a systematic review of extant laws and regulations guiding the power sector, identifying duplications, inconsistencies, and outdated provisions, proposing amendment or new legislations where required. The House will not shy away from bold legislative reforms where they are clearly justified and supported by evidence. On the synergy and collaboration with subnationals and other stakeholders, we are aware that the recent constitutional changes expanding the role of state in electricity present both an opportunity and a challenge. We are moving from a centrally dominated system toward a more decentralized, multi-layered electricity market. For this transition to work, we must therefore have the following: federal and state government must collaborate, not compete. 2, regulatory frameworks at federal and state level must be harmonized, coordinated, and domesticated. 3, there must be clarity on jurisdictional boundaries, cross-border transactions, and consumer protection. This roundtable in Lagos is an opportunity to deepen engagement with state government that have already passed their own electricity laws or established state regulators. A good example is the Lagos state that's said to be the pace setter in this issue. Dialogue with traditional operators, GENCOs, TC, and DISCOs, as well as emerging players such as mini-grid developers, embedded generators, and state utilities. Collaboration with consumer groups, labor unions, and civil society organizations. The House Committee recognizes that sustainable reform cannot be imposed from Abuja alone. It must be co-created with subnationals, private sector players, communities, and other arms of government. We therefore intend to institutionalize regular engagement between the National Assembly and state assemblies on power sector legislation and oversight, encourage the sharing of best practices among state and between state and federal agencies, ensure that our federal laws create an enabling and flexible framework for state-level innovations while maintaining national standards where necessary. The way forward and the role of this roundtable, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this roundtable is not an end in itself. It is a working session to support concrete action. From this engagement, the ad hoc committee intends to harvest the following: clear evidence-based assessment of what has worked and what has failed in the 2000 to 2024 reform and expenditure period. 2, specific recommendation for policy corrections. 3, proposals for legislative amendment or new laws. 4, suggestion for regulatory improvement and institutional realignment. 5, practical pathways for improving generation, transmission, distribution, liquidity, tariff, gas supply, and governance. Will not allow the outcome of the summit to gather dust on shelves. The House of Representatives, under the leadership of the Right Honorable Speaker Tajuddin Abbas, has given us a mandate to translate finding into 1, oversight actions where necessary to enforce accountability for past actions and expenditure. 2, legislative initiative on the floor of the House. 3, continuous engagement with the executive, regulators, and operators to ensure implementation. We also call on operators to be transparent with data and honest about constraints. Regulators to be open to reform and strengthening of their independence and capacity. Consumers group to speak clearly about service realities, but also to engage constructively with the need for sustainable sector. Development partners and financiers to share their perspective and bankability, governance, and risk. In conclusion, the Nigerian power sector is too critical to be left to rhetoric, blame trading, or have measures. Our economy cannot be competitive, our industries cannot thrive, our young people cannot fully seize digital and innovation opportunities if we do not fix power. From 2007 to 2024, Nigeria has spent significant public resources, engaged in ambitious reforms, and taken major structural decisions. Yet, the outcome have fallen short of expectations. Our responsibility now is to learn, correct, and chart a more credible path forward. The House of Representatives through this ad hoc committee, is fully committed to doing its part, asking hard questions, insisting on accountability, and advancing the legal and policy reforms required for a modern, reliable, and sustainable electricity sector. We count on your candor, your expertise, and your partnership in this roundtable. Together, let us move from promises to performance, from plans to power, from darkness to light for all Nigerians. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Insightful and thought-provoking welcome. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning of this challenge, but this reduction in substance is misleading. I think the summary of it is we have a sustainability problem. And until we are able to address this sustainability problem, we will still be here in years to come and still be talking about the same challenges. This sustainability problem can be divided, can be classified into two. We could be technical or commercial or financial viability of the sector. On the technical side, you talked about inadequate gas processing facilities. Nigeria is recognized or classified as a gas nation, but unfortunately, the gas under the ground is as useless as nothing. Until that gas is processed, it has no economic value. And today, most of the time, we do face problems with the availability of gas. We experienced it between January and up to May this year, and that has been the recurrent issue. The generation availability is also an issue. Often people talk about 16,000 megawatts, 14,000 megawatts, and so on, depending on who you ask. But the truth of the matter is how much of that installed capacity is available today. The transmission is another issue, which also has its own technical challenge. Sometimes the transmission company may say, I have 8,000 megawatt capacity, and so on and so forth. But the truth is how sustainable it is. Simulation can give you the idea of the capacity you have, but simulation often assumes the normal right temperature and pressure. That is, in our own case, where we have the issues of underconductors, that is not taken into consideration when such simulation is being conducted. Definitely, you cannot boldly say that what the result of the simulation has given you is the actual capacity you have. There is inefficient transmission, there is distribution problems, inefficient infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and so on and so forth. But I think the biggest of this sustainability challenge is actually the viability or the commerciality of the sector. I do believe that people spend money to make more money. If there is path to recovery, investment will flow. Definitely, we need to look critically at that. And I want to believe that if there is path to money, definitely the technical challenge can be definitely resolved. Alhaji Aliko Dangote is not an expert in petrol refining. Today, he owns the single largest petrol refinery because he sees that there is pathway to recovery. I believe that if we can actually look closely about the commercial viability of the sector, we can actually resolve all these challenges, including technical, including both human capacity, because there is a need for human capacity development in the sector as well. Technology is already there. We are not providing or offering new technology. It's just about adoption, at least to start with. And to adopt those technology, investment will have to be made. And for investment to be made, there must be a pathway to recovery. So we believe that this roundtable discussion will definitely provide the opportunity for all the players, both within the sector and outside the sector, to look at all the challenges and have a sustainable solution that can be adopted to resolve the problems once and for all. At the regulatory side, we do believe that these challenges are surmountable, but it requires sincerity of purpose and commitment. The political will is very necessary, not only on the policy side or the side of Mr. President, but even on the legislative side. Our experience has shown that oftentimes there is misalignment between the position of the policymakers and the legislature. And for us to be able to address the power sector challenges, there must be an harmony. There is a need for harmonization. One of the things we will be discussing with the Honorable Minister shortly this week is the need to have constant engagement with the National Assembly on some of the policy issues that are required. Tariff is critical, but may not necessarily be the only thing. But if you are able to address the sustainability or the commercial viability, I believe we can as well resolve the technical challenges. As Mr. Chairman mentioned, we continue to undergo reform in the sector. We have the state regulators coming up. We've tried to create a funnel of Nigeria electricity regulators because there is a need for us to work together. We operate in the same system. NEC is not in competition with the state regulators, and we are not interested in serving as the overlord or lords over them. But we believe that we've been doing this thing for more than 20 years. We have the experience. They need to learn from us, even if it's only the mistakes we've made in the past, they need to learn from so that they don't repeat the same mistake. And I would like to use this opportunity to urge the consultants, probably in the room or outside the room, to desist from passing misinformation, especially to the Nigeria Governors Forum. NEC is not trying or using any backdoor to truncate the ongoing reform with respect to the decentralization of the regulatory oversight or even the issues in the power sector. I spent some time last week, Monday, talking to the African Development Bank on how to get support, capacity development for the states regulators. I also spent around an hour with the World Bank on Friday discussing the same thing on how to get funding for their capacity development. If you are not interested in their success, I wouldn't be doing this. And we believe at the Commission that their success is ours. If they are doing well, we are doing well because it is the same system and it is all our responsibilities, both people that are here and outside there who are Nigerians, that we need to take this issue of power sectors very seriously. No nation has developed without access to quality and reliable electricity service. On this note, once again, I would like to welcome every one of us to this stakeholder engagement, and we look forward for educative and solution-driven conversation. Thank you so much.
Deputy Chief Whip of the House of Representatives, Honorable Dr. Ibrahim Isiaka Ayokule, to please present his remarks and declare this very important event open. Your Excellency, sir.
The issue of electricity, the energy in the country. So please sit there with us in the country. We'll surely get there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Before anything at all, I want to pass on behalf of my principal, our principal, the Speaker of the 10th National Assembly House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, PhD, GCON. I'm sure the Speaker will still be here. I don't know why I'm so convinced, because up till last night, he still promised that he was going to be here. But this morning, of course, safety first. The aircraft that was supposed to bring him here in the morning somehow had to undergo a little maintenance, which they were yet to fix up as at the hour before I came into the hall, and he asked me to come in and stand in for him. Usually, by his style, each time he will want to go up like that, he always at least take along one of the principal officers of the house along with him, so that as a backup, and that's why I'm here. Aside that, let me tell this house that if not by my new position as a principal officer, there is no how I would not have been a member to serve under Architect Ibrahim Mustafa as a member of this committee. So there is no how. Because we come a long way, and there are some things, many times in the National Assembly, Nigerians, we don't really remember about us, because many of what we do as a National Assembly, collectively, sometimes we know it's our responsibilities, but sometimes we don't really take meanings into it. In the Ninth Assembly, Architect Mustafa headed the committee on the subsidy regime. I think in the Ninth Assembly we were 4, so I'll call us 4 musketeers that we always move together, and any critical assignment, the 4 must be present. That is Architect Mustafa, Fulata, and I think I saw my very good brother, Sergius Ogun. I don't know if he's in this hall. Okay, and my humble self, 4 of us in the Ninth Assembly, any critical assignment. And one of the take-homes, the derivative of what we did then on the subsidy regime, the outcome, so we were so vigorous in the assignment. And you will still trace it back to what, at the end of the day, has given relief to. And of course, I don't want to forget about the turnaround maintenance as well, how the team were able to checkmate the way so much money were being committed at that time into turning our refineries, I don't know, round and around. And of course, because before I deliver my principal's speech, I would like to make a few comments. In 2024, I was part of the team under the House Committee on Power that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. We went to Morocco. Chairman, I'm sure you made that on record. So we went to Morocco to understudy them, and thinking that we'll be able to bring that back to Nigeria and see how it will work. Because as at that time, we discovered that Morocco alone was generating and distributing 38.7, no, they have 38.7 million in population. And they were generating 15,700 megawatts of electricity. And here we are in Nigeria. So that gives credence to the legislative agenda under the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, how to move many of our critical sectors forward. And he has found so many competent colleagues of mine that I'm seeing their faces, and I know already I can predict the outcome of this wonderful committee, ad-hoc committee, under the leadership of the chairman, Architect Mustafa, whom I'm always well pleased. And I can see as well here that Fulata serves as the deputy chairman. So, like I said, I can predict the outcome, positively, of course. So thank you all, and once again, on behalf of my principal, if you are not clapping for him for showing so much concern about being here, I will clap for him by myself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's just on a lighter mood. And of course, if you know that, oh, actually you still want to be seeing Abbas, Tajuddin, you either look here, or if your glasses are AI compliant, just switch it. Then the person speaking, you hear the voice of Tajuddin Abbas, and then you see me, my frame. It will be that of Tajuddin Abbas as well. Thank you very much. Yeah. The representative of the governor of Lagos State, oh, sorry, I was trying to be biased, I'm sorry. Maybe because I came from the fastest growing economic state in Nigeria. Yeah, Ogun is feeding Lagos now. Sorry. So, because we see the governor seated here, so it's not by any means you're jumping any protocol. That is the representative of the governor of Lagos State. Mr. Chairman will permit me to further say something, because Mr. Speaker, I guess, had with him a list of protocol which he would have wished to use in addressing this gathering. Probably the invitees are not here, or they are being represented. But before I go into the list, which he said I should read as well for record purposes, I want to greet Mr. Chairman of this ad-hoc committee in person of Honorable Architect Ibrahim Al-Mustafa Aliyu, FNI, PhD. My very distinguished honorable colleagues present here, that I respect so much. And of course, I have some lists of people here. The speaker will want me to mention them one by one. His Excellency Abdurrahman Abdurazak, Governor of Kwara State and Chairman of the Nigeria Governors Forum. The Chief Lateef Agbemi-San, CON, Honorable Minister of Justice. Mr. Taiwan Oyedele, Tayo, I guess they wanted to say, Honorable Minister of Finance. Senator Abubakar Bagudu, Budget. Joseph Olasukomi, Engineer Joseph Talimu Self, Olayemi Kadoso, Orisayemi Eyeson, Rabiu Abdullah Omar, Musili Olalekan Oseni, Oriwan Lanre Babalola, Olu Awolowo, Adebowale A. Adedokun, Audu Muhammad Bello, Audu Ibrahim, Muhammad Sanusi, Muhammad, Tajuddin Abdullahi, Jobson, Osodo, Johnson, Akinobu, Jennifer, AD-HOC, and Engineer Adeshayo Olusegun Michael. Being that as it may, I wouldn't want to forget the presence of my very dearest brother from the same home, Akin Olubade. You are welcome, brother. And of course, the MD of Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. Permit me to stand on the existing protocol as well as espoused and established by my very dearest brother who had been here doing all that. So that I'll be able to have time to present my principal's paper. Like I said earlier on, when you have somebody who knows his onions, who is on top of his game and on top of his job, what more do you say? Actually, the chairman practically had, when he came on board, he had started and finished the program by himself with his presentation. And just as my very dearest brother, our regulator, when he came to say what more do we have to say. But if I were to be the one here on my own, definitely I'll just take a bow before all of you and go. But because I'm representing my principal, our principal, it's a must that I have to deliver a speech, which is well loaded as well. But definitely, you know, all these PhD people, they know how to take us both into the classroom, out of the classroom, and going practical. And that's what we have here. These are special remarks by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Abbas Tajuddin, PhD, GCON, at the opening of the 4-day Parliamentary and Stakeholders Engagement Summit on Power Sector Reforms and Expenditure, 2007 to 2024, presently holding here in Lagos at Eco Signature. It gives me great pleasure to join you today at this Parliamentary Stakeholders Summit on Power Sector Reforms and Expenditure in Nigeria. I commend the Chairman and members of the House Ad-Hoc Committee on the probe of power sector reforms and expenditure, as well as all stakeholders gathered here, for undertaking what is arguably one of the most consequential examinations of public policy and public expenditure in contemporary Nigeria. The significance of this engagement extends beyond electricity. This summit is not just a discussion about power generation, transmission infrastructure, distribution networks, tariffs, metering regulation, or financing. It is, more importantly, a discussion about the future of Nigeria's economy. It is a discussion about whether Africa's largest economy can achieve its aspirations for industrialization, competitiveness, job creation, technological innovation, and broad-based prosperity without first resolving one of its most persistent structural constraints. There is perhaps no greater paradox in Nigeria's development experience than the fact that a nation holding proven natural gas reserves of over 209 trillion cubic feet, a hydroelectric potential of approximately 27.5 gigawatts, and a solar energy potential estimated at up to 210 gigawatts, continue to suffer. Its citizens with electricity at levels that rank among the lowest on the African continent, presently in Nigeria. just as the representative of the, just as the MD of Nigeria Regulatory Commission, Electricity, mentioned, no matter how many cubic feet of gas we have underneath, once it's not processed, it is useless. And processing it now means, again, utilization and converting it to economic use. The African continental average is 750 kilowatt hours. The global average exceeds 3,100 kilowatt hours. South Africa delivers roughly 4,000 kilowatts per person annually. That Africa's most populous nation, with all of its natural endowments, sits at this level is not the consequence of scarcity. It is the consequence of a structural failure that the committee has been charged to examine, and that this summit must help us begin to correct. History teachers and those who know well, they have taught us a simple lesson. No country has achieved sustained economic transformation without first addressing the question of energy. Every major industrial power has built its prosperity on reliable and affordable electricity. Factories depend on power. Hospitals depend on power. Schools depend on power. Digital infrastructure depends on power. Agricultural processing depends on power. Modern economics are, in many respects, electricity economies. This is why the House of Representatives consider it necessary to undertake this very investigation. According to records before the committee, more than 5.2 trillion naira and approximately 16.9 billion were committed to Nigeria's power sector through budgetary allocations. You see how staggering, huge, and some other intervention programs, loans, grants, guarantees, and related financial mechanisms during the period under review. The World Bank alone has provided approximately $3.65 billion in sector support over the past 24 years to improve electricity in Nigeria. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, we are still not there up to today. These figures represent one of the largest concentrations of public investment in any sector of our national economy. We want us to probe this further, and I can see that many of you as critical stakeholders in this country, you are wondering if all these figures, if they are true, or far from being the real expenditure in the last how many years, and we're still experiencing what we're experiencing today. However, the question before us, therefore, not whether resources were committed. They were. In actual fact, they were and are still being committed as we speak. The question is whether those resources produced outcomes commensurate with the scale of investment. Your guess is as good as mine. Public expenditure must ultimately be judged not by the amount spent, but the value created. Citizens do not consume appropriations. These are mere papers. What do we consume? We consume electricity, and not how much is committed, which is just always written on the papers. Businesses do not evaluate policy based on announcements. They evaluate policy based on service delivery. Investors do not commit capital based on intentions. They respond to results. I will have clapped for my speaker on that very comment too. Over the last 2 decades, Nigeria has pursued some of the most ambitious electricity reforms on the African continent. We enacted the Electric Power Sector Reform Act. We unbundled the former monopoly structure. We privatized generation and distribution assets. We established regulators and market institutions. We introduced intervention programs. We implemented tariff reforms. We restructured market operations. Most recently, the 10th National Assembly enacted the Electricity Act of 2023, opening a new chapter in the evolution of the industry and creating opportunities for greater participation by states and private investors. Yet, despite these efforts, many of the challenges that inspired those reforms remain with us. The data makes this plain. Nigeria's installed generation capacity stands at approximately 14,000 megawatts. Yet, in 2024, the average electricity delivered through national grid was between 4,100 and 4,200 megawatts. This means that at its most productive peak, the Nigerian grid delivers less than 40% of installed capacity. According to the World Bank, approximately 85 million Nigerians, a number exceeding the entire population of Germany, remain entirely without access to grid electricity. In rural communities, the access rate falls to just 26%, according to the National Electricity Regulatory Commission's own data. As of December 2024, only 46.57% of the 13.5 million registered electricity customers had functional meters. More than 7.2 million customers are still being billed on estimates rather than actual consumption. What makes these challenges particularly difficult is that they are interconnected. Generation cannot succeed without transmission. Transmission cannot fulfill its purpose without effective distribution. Distribution cannot become commercially viable without improved metering and revenue collection. Gas to power arrangements cannot function effectively without coordination across multiple institutions. In the first 5 months of 2024 alone, gas supply disruptions caused generation losses estimated at 12,700 gigawatts per hour. That same year, 86 transmission towers were vandalized and 26 were completely destroyed, triggering prolonged blackouts across multiple regions in the country. And more of these components can operate optimally without a stable regulatory environment. Nigerian businesses now self-generate up to 48% of their own electricity needs, not by choice, but because the grid has left them with no alternatives. This reality imposes enormous costs on the economy. Independent analysis places Nigeria's annual economic losses from unreliable electricity at between 5 and 7% of our GDP, equivalent to 22 to 26 billion US dollars annually. As we deliberate over the coming days, we must also acknowledge that government alone cannot solve this challenge. The original rationale for reform was the recognition that public resources alone would never be sufficient to finance the scale of investment that this very sector.
And after the presentation,
the CEOs here present, the honorable members of the House of Representatives here present, including our honorables from Lagos State. You can see my brother Laguda and others. I want to recognize you. Another CEO here present and stakeholders, including the Dr. Hosseini and others here present. I want to recognize you and actually permit me to stand on the existing protocol. First of all, I want to apologize for Mr. Governor not being able to hear. He has other state assignments. Particularly, I must also appreciate the speech of the AD-HOC chairman of this event, who has actually done a good job when you look at the paragraph 7 of his speech with the way forward And that is majorly the main essence of this event. And he has totally stated the way forward with his recommendation on how to address the epileptic power we have in Lagos State. But I don't know, I want to ask the AD-HOC chairman and the rep of the speaker if I have a speech here. It's not a good message in which governors, as Mr. Governor has addressed some of the challenges we have in Lagos State. It's about 13 pages. I don't know if they have the permission to read it out. Okay, thank you very much. And at the end of it, I'm going to submit the speech of Mr. Governor. On behalf of Mr. Governor, I want to read out his speech. I wish to bring by commending the Honorable Speaker and the Chairman of this AD-HOC committee for the encourage and tenacity with which this investigation has been pursued. 6 months of investigating, hearing, physical inspection, and the difficult of work of compelling accountability from institutions that could rather remain unexamined. That is not routine legislative oversight. It is a rescue mission and deserves to succeed. My colleagues, that is government was referring to other governors present, and he also saw that the chairman of the Governors Forum will be here. That is why he said, my colleagues, the governors who have spoken before me must have laid out the national picture, with clarity and force. I will not repeat what has been well said, just like what the chairman of our committee has said today. Instead, I intend to use this time available to this presentation to do something more specific, to tell the story of what one state has done, what that state has learned, what this committee and the nation must know to do to make the model replicable. That state is Lagos. And the story is not a simple one. Lagos, we all know, is home to over 22 million people with land space of 3,577 square meters, out of which 1/3 is water, and it has rich population, which demand for power. We generate an estimate 35% of Nigerian or GDP. Our port handled the majority of Nigerian seaborne trade. Our manufacturers, our financial institution, our technology firm, our hospitals and schools, they are all seaway of Nigerian economic body. And for decades, every single one of them has been forced to self-generate the electricity that should have been delivered by the national grid. The cost of that failure, specific to Lagos, is estimated at 2.3 billion annual in self-generation expenditure. That is what people spend to generate electricity on their own, is 2.7 billion annually. That is not a national aggregate. That is what Lagos alone spend. Its businesses, its household, the institutions spend every year on diesel, petrol, gas, generators, inverters, solar backup system, and the maintenance of private power infrastructure that exists for one reason only, because the public infrastructure has not worked. To put the figure in context, the 2.7 billion is larger than the annual budget of several states of the Federation. It is capital that Lagos business cannot invest in expansion, innovation, or employment. It is a structural tax on competitiveness levy, not by any legislative, but by the accumulative failure of 17 years of reform. Every manufacturer who has told this committee about creeping energy cost, every disco that has explained its revenue shortfall, every gas company that has described the commercial dysfunction of the sector, those argument coverage in Lagos, because Lagos absorbed more of the consequence than other single jurisdiction in the country. I raise this not to amplify a complaint, but to establish the stake when Lagos decided 3 years ago that it could not afford to wait for federal solution to arrive. This was the calculation we were making. And the decision we took has produced results that I believe are directly relevant to the committee, to the work of this committee. Let me walk this distinguished gathering through the architecture of the Lagos State Electricity Reform Program, because the details matters for every thinking to replicate it. The foundation was legislative. As we all know, in April 2024, the Mr. Governor signed Lagos State Electricity Law 2024 into law. This legislation did three things simultaneously. One, it established a clear institutional framework for the Lagos State electricity market. It defined the regulative framework, system operation, and policy role, separated and distinguished. And it creates a legal basis for private operators to enter the Lagos market under state licensing. The law was signed in order to directly respond to the Electricity Act of 2023 by the federal government, which devolved authority to intrastate electricity activities to state government. It was designed to optionalize that devolution fully, not partially. The institutional structure we build is deliberately separated by function. The Lagos State Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources holds the policy authority. The Lagos State Electricity Regulative Commission, LASEC, holds regulative authority. The Lagos State Independent System Operator, LAISO, holds system planning, power procurement authority, market participant, generators, distribution, off-grid operators, metering companies operate under licenses issued by LASEC. This separation was deliberate. One of the lessons of the national reform experience is that confronting policy, regulative, and operation within the same institutional structure produce exactly the kind of governance failure that this committee is now auditing. We did not repeat the same mistake. By March 2026, the Lagos State electricity market has moved into full operational status. In March 2026, as I've said, Mr. Governor inaugurated LASEC board, making the completion of our regulative institutional governance structure. And in April 2026, Lagos State government signed power purchase agreement and concessional agreement with 3 independent power producers, the first state licensed IPPs in Nigeria, with projection additional capacity of between 200 to 400 megawatts. These projects are targeted at high demand industrial areas and critical infrastructure corridor where the absence of reliable power has been mostly economically damaged. We expect the first of these IPP to achieve commercial operation between late 2026 and early 2027. In May 2026, LASEC approved 14 electricity operators across the off-grid, metering, and distribution market segment. We are advancing the Electric Eyes of Lagos, called EEL program, on AI enabler metering and monitoring system for pilot implementation from October 2026, with 100% metering across Lagos as the declared target. The Lagos State Electricity Law 2024 also permits intrastate willing and retailer competition, enabling large industrial customers to contract directly with generators without passing through a distribution company. This is a market design feature that the national reform framework never achieved, and significantly for industrial competitioners cannot be overstated. This is the operational picture, but I want to be direct with this committee about something none of it is yet completed, and none of this resolve the interface problem, which I will address shortly, because it is the most important thing I have to say today. A state electricity market, however, well designed, operates within a national grid structure. The Lagos State Electricity Market licensed independent power producer, but those producers must connect to transmission infrastructure. That infrastructure, the Transmission Company of Nigeria and the national grid, remain federal. The interface between our state-regulated market and the national transmission backbone is the single most critical unresolved issue in the implementation of subnational electricity market across Nigeria. Let me be specific about the gaps we have encountered. One, transmission access. The Lagos-based independent power producer seeking to wheel electricity to consumer within Lagos State depend on transmission wheeling arrangements that are currently governed by federal framework designed for a pre-devolution market. The protocol for stranded metering at state-federal interface and grid access pricing have not been updated to reflect the new constitutional reality. This creates regulative uncertainty that arise, that cost of capital for state-level IPP projects and slow the pace of new investment. On the existing DISCO, the distribution companies operate within Lagos, Eco Electricity Distribution Company and Ikeja Electric, old federal license issued under the 2013 privatization framework. Under the Electricity Act 2023, the Electricity Power Sector Reform Amendment Act and Electric Power Sector Reform Amendment Act of 2026, particularly February. Regulatory authority over their intrastate operation is transmitting to Lagos, but the transition protocol are incomplete. There is no clear framework yet for how LASEC and NEC share or transfer oversight of DISCO that operate partially or partly within a state market and partly in the border national framework. Until that clarity exists, the consumer protection and performance enforcement mandate that Lagos Act is law, we cannot fully exercise this practice. On legacy debt, DISCO, Eco-DISCO and Ikeja Electric carried the legacy of same post-privatization financial dysfunction that this committee has been examining. That legacy, market shortfall, unpaid invoice, technical and commercial losses well above benchmark, predicts the state electricity market and what not created by it, but it lands in Lagos. The metering gap, the revenue collection gaps, the underinvestment in distribution infrastructure, these are federal era problems that have been handed to a state market that did not inherit the federal government balance sheet, with which know to resolve them. On gas supply, as mentioned by even the chairman, there is a problem, and the next chairman on the gas supply. Lagos area generation capacity, including our new IPP, depend on gas supply infrastructure that runs through national pipeline, and it is governed by federal regulative arrangement. The Nigerian Mid and Downstream Petroleum Regulative Authority, the gas aggregation architect the supply arrangement between generation companies and gas producers. None of these have been restructured to accommodate state-level market participations and participants. A state licensed IPP in Lagos seeking to contract directly for gas supply operates in a procurement environment designed for entity within the national market, not subnational ones. This is a gap that requires legislative and regulative attention at the federal level. This is a working summit, and the committee has convened 4 thematic working groups to develop actionable recommendations. I wish to place 4 specific requests before this committee, the chairman, before this committee, to this committee, before the National Assembly and the Federal Executive. The first one has to do with establish a formal state interface protocol for electricity market operation. The Electricity Act of 2023 and the February 2026 amendment created the constitutional and legislative framework for state electricity market. What does not yet exist is an operational protocol governing how state-regulated market interact with the national grid. The TNC, TCN, and other federal licensed entities. This protocol must cover transmission access, wheeling charges, grid connection standard for state licensed generators, metering at state-federal boundaries, and the handover timeline for DISCO regulative oversight. Lagos, as the most advanced state market in the country, is prepared to work with NEC, TCN, and the Federal Ministry of Power to develop a model protocol that other states can adopt. We request that this committee recommend the establishment of a joint federal state electricity market coordination committee with a mandate to produce this protocol within 90 days of this summit. Secondly, fast-tracking the DISCO. Transmission framework for state regulative market. The regulative transmission of DISCO operating within state market from NEC jurisdiction to state regulatory commission jurisdiction is the most operational, urgent, unresolved matter arising from the 2023 and 2026 legislative reform. We recommend that this committee propose a time-bound transmission schedule, not an open-ended process, with clear milestone, defined performance benchmark, and a mechanism for state regulators to begin exercising customer protection and enforcement power without waiting for full transition. Lagos cannot protect its electric customer from DISCO non-performance if the regulators choose remain with a federal body whose primary jurisdiction is the national market. Thirdly, restructure the gas supply framework to include state market participants. The current gas procurement and aggregation architecture was designed for the national electric supply industry. As state market grows and state licensed IPP comes online, they will require direct and backable gas supply agreements that do not route through the national market structure that were designed for a different era. We recommend that Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority and the Ministry of Petroleum Resources be directed to develop subnational gas access framework with standardized contract template, credit support and mechanism, and supply provision for state licensed generation company. This is not a request for preferred treatment. It is a request for the gas supply infrastructure to catch up with the electricity legislation that this House has already passed. Fourth, resolve the legacy debts. questioned as a precondition for market viability. This post-privatization liability that has been working to reduce the market shortfall accumulated by DISCOs. The government, MDAs, debt owed to electricity distribution companies. This must be conclusive resolved on a state-by-state basis with clear accounting in order for sub-national electricity market to start from a clean commercial foundation. Lagos cannot build a viable state electricity market if the distribution infrastructure within its territory is financially distressed from obligations that predate the state market existent. We request a specific worksheet to complete the Lagos area liability resolution within the next 12 months, with transparent reporting to both NEC and LASEC. Honorable Chairman of this committee, let me close with a commitment rather than a conclusion. Lagos is the host of this summit, but we are not hosts in the conventional sense. Providing a venue and wishing the delegate well. We are a participant with skin in the game. The reform this committee commends with land here. In Lagos, with more economic consequence than almost anywhere else in Nigeria, every megawatt that a state licensed IPP injects into our national grid reduced the 2.7 billion self-generation burden on our business carried out. Every DISCO that perform under enforceable standard improve the lives of the 22 million people who depend on distribution infrastructure within our borders. Every legislative gaps this committee close make the Lagos Electricity Law 2024 more functional in practice and not more elegant on paper. Lagos is prepared to share the institutional design we have developed, our regulatory framework, our licensing architect, our IPP procurement model, our interface management approach with any state that wishes to build its own electricity market. We are prepared to host the joint federal-state coordination body I have proposed, or to second technical staff to support its work. We are prepared to serve as a proof of concept that subnational electricity market works, provided that the federal legislative and regulatory environment complete the framework that the Electricity Act of 2023 and the February 2026 amendment have so promising begun. The lights must come on in Nigeria, not eventually, not after another cycle of promise and investigation. Now Lagos has choosing to be part of the answer. We invite this committee, the National Assembly, and the Federal Executive to complete architecture that make that answer possible at national scale. I thank the Honorable Chairman, the distinguished members of this committee, and all participants for your attention. Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, Governor of Lagos State. Thank you for listening.
As our chairman, the chairman ad hoc committee on power sector reform and expenditure probe and forensic audit, Honorable Architect Ibrahim Al-Mustafa Aliyu, PhD, FNIA, has a very quick announcement to make. Please listen.
Thank you very much, able MC. Honorable colleagues, If you go through the program, as earlier announced also, you see that we are going into the technical session, which involves receiving submissions or presentation from the stakeholders so identified. After that, we'll now go into a syndicate grouping technical engagement where membership will be drawn from the parliament and the stakeholders. We have an able secretariat that we believe will be able to manage the syndicate groups. At this point, I'll call on the local organizing committee of this summit, the chairman, Honorable Fuad Laguda, and the Honorable Ali Ademi, and Honorable Kafilat, to put it together, look at the attendance of the participants, particularly the key stakeholders, and place them properly within the 7 syndicate groups we earlier identified, so that immediately after the presentation, the syndicate group can take up. The secretary should also provide the list of the secretarial staff that will be attached to the syndicate group. In the next 10 minutes, we'll be going for lunch. It's a lunch time, but before that, I want to oblige the MBET, the MD MBET, to make his presentation. He showed me a text message that they have a new minister. The minister will be resuming tomorrow, and they are all invited to go. So I want to oblige him to come on stage to make his presentation before he takes his leave. The MC, please. I try to avail the local organizing committee with the list of the stakeholders so that they can be able to place them for further instruction. You can invite the MBET to come on board and make his presentation, please. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman has actually carried out the onerous task of inviting the MD NBET, so I'll just tag along and hang on that. Please help me put your hands together as he makes his way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Managing Director, Chief Executive.
Protocol, Mr. Chairman. Our presentation from NBET is, we have 10 minutes to make a presentation as indicated in the program, and I'm going to run through the presentation very quickly. We have about 10 slides which we will speak to. The presentation is on NBET's mandate and reforms programs of the federal government of Nigeria in the power sector. By way of an outline, we will be speaking on NBET's mandate. We'll look at the stakeholders within the ecosystem. We'll talk about the sector evolution. We'll now look at sector challenges and some of the federal government responses. And then we'll look at the sustainability measures in the sector. So the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC is the federal government of Nigeria wholly owned company with shareholders of note being the Bureau for Public Enterprise and the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, holding the ownership in the ratio of 80-20%. NBET's vision is to create a financially viable electricity market. And the mission of NBET is to be an effective and efficient catalyst for private sector investment in the sector. NBET commenced operations trading in the electricity market in February 2015. And over the years have volumes of trade in excess of $2 billion. The governance of NBET have typically been the chair being the Minister of Finance, but right now have a chair that was appointed by Mr. President, His Excellency, the former Deputy Governor of Kebbi State and current National Organizing Secretary of the African APC, Dr. Suleiman Muhammad Arugungu, the Jaraman Kebbi. Stakeholders within our ecosystem include the legislator, which is the National Assembly, the the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, the Nigerian Independent System Operation, the distribution companies, generation companies, the federal government for policy and guarantee backups, and eligible customers. So the sector evolution over the years, we have pre-2005, that is the NEPA PACN days operated, where we have a vertically integrated utility called NEPA. In 2001, there was the National Electric Power Policy, which set to reform the sector. That dovetailed in 2005, where we have the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act that was enacted by the National Assembly, which unbundled the vertically integrated NEPA into 18 successor companies. That's 11 distribution companies and the generation companies. And then created the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission and other agencies within the sector like the Rural Electrification Agency, the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC. Between 2010 and 2011, there was a presidential roadmap that launched and created MBET, and MBET was therefore incorporated in 2010. The privatization, as we all know, happened in 2013. For the stakeholders who are here and many who are not here, the privatization could not have happened if there was no MBET. Because MBET was the entity that was created and put in the center to guarantee investors that when they build power plants, the federal government of Nigeria is assuring them there is an institution that guarantees them a return on their investment. So we have looked at the stakeholders, critical stakeholders in the sector. Now we'll go on to look at the sector challenges that have impacted the sector. One of these being the issue of tariff. Depending on who you ask, but the technical people in the industry have identified, and the regulator identified, that the tariff is not cost reflective. What that means is that the tariff as existing today does not cover the cost of generation, transmission, and distribution. The entire cost of the electricity is not covered by the tariff that is in place. That's why we have multiple bands under the service-based tariff at different amounts. There's invoice escalation that has resulted for over time, foreign exchange fluctuations, because the tariff is indexed to the dollar, and also inflation. There's last mile losses at the distribution segment of the electricity value chain. And there is the big elephant in the room, which is the infrastructure deficit of the NESI. That infrastructure deficit includes the generation infrastructure deficit occasioned by challenges around liquidity, transmission inadequacy occasioned by insufficient funding, then distribution inadequacy for infrastructure occasioned by losses that are inherent in the sector and the malaise of the distribution sector. The impact of the liquidity constraints have resulted in reduced generation capacity because generators are not able to now fund their operations and maintenance over time, including procurement of spare parts and turnaround maintenance of their machines. Sorry, there's been a technical glitch on my system. So the transmission, the impact of the liquidity, no, absolutely. The impact of liquidity constraints in the sector have resulted in, amongst others, reduced generation capacity, like I spoke earlier, accumulation of debt owed generation companies and other players in the electricity market, gas supply disruptions because GENCOs could not now fund, gas costs were not being paid by generation companies, and the gas costs could therefore not now provide reliable supply, including making the requested investment to expand gas availability. Limited infrastructure investment that I spoke on earlier, and all these have also impacted on investors' confidence and the willingness of investors to continue to invest in the sector. As I have said in several fora, the one single biggest problem of the sector is that these whole challenges impact on investors, and as long as investors do not find the sector viable, do not see a line of sight of getting their money back, they would not invest. And if they do not invest, we will remain where we are. So the sector has to be made viable for investors to find it attractive, because the whole essence of the privatization was government realizing that government have no business in business, and therefore the private sector was required to come in to make the requisite investment to expand our generation, transmission, and distribution capacities to bring more power to power our homes, our industries, and our commercial enterprises. Therefore, addressing the fundamentals and making the sector viable is key to attracting investment, and attracting investment is what will solve the problem over time. So we'll go on to look at some of the federal government intervention in the sector. So government have over the years significantly demonstrated the will to reform the sector and to support the sector to viability. Amongst others, including the power sector, power assurance program, where government injected the sum of 701 billion through the power, the payment assurance facility, and the further expansion of another 600 billion, and multiple investments through World Bank intervention, notably the $750 million PSRO, and other tariff reforms that have been implemented by the regulator and approved by the government. So what are the key milestones of the market so far? MBED, through the regulator's support, have implemented a gas supply stabilization fund that enabled over 770 billion payment to gas suppliers through the gas supply stabilization fund. The power sector reform PSRO of the 750 million. Again, recall I said it is because of MBED that the privatization even happened, because at the time of the privatization, government realized that the utilities do not have the financial wherewithal, the financial viability to trade with themselves. So MBED had to be created to be in the middle. And that investment resulted in the privatization resulted in the generation of 2.5 billion US dollars. Another milestone is the eligible customer regulation that the regulator implemented. And MBED, supportive of that regulation, signed suppliers of last resort to enable the consummation of transactions under the eligible customer regulation. MBED is currently championing NENEX. That is the next phase to support the move of the regulator to transit the market into a willing buyer, willing seller model with minimum government intervention. NENEX is an energy exchange platform that would be the marketplace to bring willing buyers and willing sellers of electricity with little or no government intervention. Transitioning to a sustainable NESI, opportunities and policy priorities. So I end with this slide and look at some of the opportunities that are inherent in the electricity market. Our Nigeria electricity market, in spite of all the challenges, have a lot of opportunities for investors and for players who want to play in the sector. One, I would say, is a growing demand. The Nigerian population continues to grow, and the demand for electricity by commercial, residential, and industrial customers remains high. That is an opportunity that can be tapped into. And the Electricity Act, the Electricity Act 2023 provides that opportunity for not only the subnationals, but private businesses to play actively across the entire value chain. Another significant opportunity inherent in the Nigerian electricity sector is the renewable energy potentials. For these renewable energies, solar, hydro, and other renewable resources offer significant expansion opportunities. Studies have shown that Nigeria has over 100 potential hydro projects that can come on stream. Regional trade, because of Nigeria's location in the sub-region and the membership of the West Africa Power Pool, Nigeria has the opportunity of trading with its neighbors if it can get its electricity market right. There are private sector investment opportunities. These are available, but the liquidity challenges within the sector needs to be resolved to make the segment properly de-risked enough for private sector investors to come in. So what are the key priorities? The key priorities are, one, resolving the legacy debt across the electricity value chain. You may have heard of the 4 trillion power sector bond issuance program of the that was approved by the Federal Executive Council and Mr. President, which seeks to address the backward debt overhang. Because you need to clean up and then before you address the future, you need to clear the backlog of debt burden on the sector. Implementing a sustainable cost-reflective tariff. The regulator is working with the federal government and the Office of the SA Energy to sculpt out or craft out a tariff that addresses and provides subsidy only for the poor and vulnerable, targeted subsidy. Strengthening revenue collection and reducing commercial losses along the distribution segment through DISREP and other projects. Improving market governance and contractual enforcement. Developing the energy exchange, which I've spoken about. And all this would invariably resolve the investors' confidence in the sector and make the sector more sustainable and more viable. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share our thoughts. I will continue to share our thoughts in the next few days and engage with the House Committee to make your work productive. Thank you.
Active collaboration across the entire value chain. TCN remains fully committed to support the vision of the Electricity Act 2023 and working with government regulators, investors, and other stakeholders to build a stronger, more reliable, and globally competitive power sector capable of driving Nigeria's economic growth and industrial development. The closing remark, sir. Right Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairman, and members of the committee, distinguished stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude with this. Nigeria's electricity challenges are well understood, and the solutions are already known. What is required now is sustained political will, coordinated action, and the effective implementation of existing plans, laws, and partnership. TCN has demonstrated strong delivery capacity with verifiable achievements including an 8,700 megawatt wheeling capacity, a historic peak transmission of 5,801.84 megawatts, and the record daily energy delivery of 128,370.75 megawatt hour. It has also commissioned 82 numbers transformers in 23 months, adding about 8,500 MVA, delivered major transmission upgrades such as the Ihobo turn-in turn-out on Benin Ajakuta 330 kV and the Bauchi turn-in turn-out on Jos Bauchi 330 kV single-circuit lines, mobilized over $1.4 billion in development, financing, and advanced national SCADA development. TCN affirms that the transmission grid is ready and continues to expand and modernize with legislative support in terms of funding, policy direction, and oversight. The transmission network can remain backbone of the reliable modern electricity system for Nigeria. TCN commits to full collaboration with stakeholders and accountability for results, while reaffirming its dedication to delivering a stronger, more resilient grid in service of national development and the needs of all Nigerians. Thank you, and this is the end of my MDCEO Transmission Company of Nigeria speech. I would like to add that TCN is ever ready to make sure that all the stakeholders that we are here, we make the power to be more than what it is as at now. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.